Hello and welcome to GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max broadcast number 130. The format of the hour is I do a little intro that largely consists of me asking you, if you're joining me live, to stick a question mark at the end of your sentence, if indeed it's a question. And all questions I will endeavour to answer towards the end of the broadcast, which will be the second section called Q&A. The first section is demos. Anything that I have to share, I share today, both on GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max. And I'm going to assume everyone can hear me loud and clear. I have a little volume control that has a readout, and every time I speak, the bar moves, so I'm pretty clear. At my end, I am going to assume I'm pretty clear everywhere else. But I'm going to be a bit paranoid, and you can't see it, but I can. I'm going to switch the live chat up to one of my monitors so I can just keep a third eye on it, if you know what I mean. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start with GameGuru Classic, a quick one. Last broadcast there were some tweaks over Christmas that we released. Well, the tweaks continue, this time from T-Bone. Various asset collection fixes. So there's some models out there and they've got the wrong collision shape. So they're either a box when there should be a polygon, or a polygon when there should be a cylinder. You get the idea. There's probably quite a lot. Anyone who's familiar with GameGuru Classic knows we are literally in the thousands of game-ready 3D objects. That's a lot of stuff to keep check of. It's like herding cats. And so I'm really, really pleased and thankful that T-Bone has stepped in, found some of the worst offenders, fixed them, and created a pull request on the GameGuru Classic repository. And I invite anyone who has an interest or a skill to check out the repository. We absolutely welcome contributions, both small and large. And we've made it as easy as possible to get the repo, compile it, run it in your GameGuru Classic and get started. Even if it's just adding features for your own games, you can do that as well. But if the feature's pretty cool and you don't mind sharing, let us see it. If we like it, we'll make a few little tweaks, and it goes into the official version of GameGuru Classic. How cool is that? And if you like, we'll even credit you. So that's it, a really brief one for GameGuru Classic. Let's move now into the GameGuru Max universe. Okay, so this is really where I want to show you the progress of what's been going on. If you've been tuning in, you'll know we're pretty much at that last leg before we leave early access and enter version 1. But that requires, and it's predicated on the fact we need to complete the RPG mechanics and virtual reality. And as an aside, a little third leg is the conversion from GameGuru Classic projects to GameGuru Max projects. So once Max is nearly at version 1, anyone who's still on Classic who wants to move their game project that they've been working on for maybe a year onto Max, we're going to snag that, make sure that it is a smooth-ish sort of process within the realms and remit of what the technology can do right now for version 1. Anyway, I feel like I'm waffling now. What I want to do is show you some cool stuff. So I've preloaded my little demo, but before that I want to show you this RPG guide. Now anyone who's got YouTube access, everyone, can just pause this video and read this at your own leisure. I intended you to read it, but if you're interested you can just press the pause button. What I wanted to show is that we've already laid out the first draft of all the mechanics we want for the RPG element of GameGuru Max version 1, and I just wanted to call your attention to these 5 sections: inventory, player progress, shop trading chest, crafting, and map view. Anyone who's familiar with RPG games instantly know what these 5 things are. And they are basically the screens, minimum set of screens you're going to need if you want a decent RPG experience for your player. And it just goes into lots more detail, etc, etc. And it's a document we're continuing to add to just to get the clarity and the detail and make sure everything ties together. But I'd like to show you what I've been doing right now. Well, I say there's a team of us working on it in various guises. And before I show you the level, because everyone's seen the 3D level, maybe what you haven't seen is the HUD. This is the latest. It's still just programmer art. This isn't final graphics. we need an artist to step in to do the final graphics. But if anyone's who's understanding what an in-game HUD screen is, can probably recognise, okay, you're all familiar with the health. Also maybe familiar with armour. So the armour will take the damage before it impacts on your player's health. If you've got magic, you might want mana to say how much magic you can cast. Stamina, how much energy you have before you start slowing down. And your progress through the game, or at least your velocity of progress through your game, is inhibited. And maps and radars and objective compasses and arrows and all the rest of it. So this is where it all is. There's basically two parts, how you make your own RPG game. You got the front end and the back end. This screen editor takes care of the front end and one other aspect which is super, super important, which is the values, the global settings, the global variables, whatever you want to call it, that connects the visual, what you see, with what's going on in the game's back end, the logic. And you need a conduit for those two worlds to communicate. So when a value changes in the game, you see it on the screen. And what we've chosen to do for the first implementation is user-defined globals. So as you can see here, I've just selected this big 0 under the mana. And if you look up here, user-defined global name, I'm calling it my mana. And also on the screen editor, you get to set the initial value of that. So that's as simple as it gets, and also as powerful. Because now you can drop in a gadget, something visual, you can give it a name, something that the logic understands, and then set an initial value. And you'll find this system, this mechanism, is used over and over again. From the initial values you want to start your game with, to other settings like player skills and proficiencies that you want your game to start with, and you can represent it visually on the screen, which I think is where most people think they want to start. Coders who've been doing it a while don't really start at the screen, they start in the code and laying out all their data structures. But I think most people who play games would associate the stuff they see on the screen as the thing they want to do first. So which is why the screen is such a nice idea. You can lay it all out, and only when it looks pretty and you're happy with the layout, then tie in some global variables, and then you can dive into the game logic as a secondary thought, which I'm going to show you a little bit of now. So you see, I'll just pay attention to that, my mana, that's the one we'll focus on. Now if we go into the level and I select this, which I'm going to call my little potion, and go into behaviors, this is a potion that it's a behavior that we've created. I'm going to create a lot of template behaviors for you, one for health, which you've had in the past, but also ones for reinforcing your armor, a stamina pill or whatever, something that will increase your stamina. And potion, just for our own template tests, this potion will give you magical powers. And if you scroll down, you'll actually see, again, my mana. This is the same variable that we named and created back in the screen editor, but now we have connected it dynamically to this behavior. And so you can see, you can have as many of these associations as you want just by using a set of unique names that you get to choose. And so without further ado, I'll just run. People want to see it, I guess. Now if I run into this and it says E to collect mana potion, actually I've just jumped ahead and my demo just jumped ahead. I think I know it's because I saved, didn't I? Right, I didn't see any of that. Okay, so you go up to this, E to use mana potion, and now we've got 10 mana. Now obviously I'm working on the front end and the back end of the mechanics. I haven't got magical spells to use up the mana yet, but you get the idea. Now I've got 10 mana, I might have learned a fireball spell which takes 2 mana to cast, so I can fire 5 fireballs with that statistic. More on that in the future, in future broadcasts, so tune in if you want to find out how you create and shoot fireballs out your eyes. But the other thing I wanted to show you is this. And this is where we're going into the first of those 5 RPG screens, which is the inventory. Right now you're familiar with the idea of running up to an app and pressing E and using it immediately. Inventories aren't like that. Inventories are things you can run up to an object, stick it in your pocket, use it later. And that's what this single, simple and powerful tick box is. It's collectible. Every dynamic object in your game will now have, underneath always active, this. Is it collectible? Which opens up a brand new component, because this brand new component, this is also a work in progress, but the general idea is objects in your game that are suitable for going in your inventory can have additional properties. And rather than us hard code it, we're going to let you decide what those properties are. We're certainly going to help with templates, show you some suggestions on what kind of attributes you might want. Like if this was an RPG game where the idea was to collect something of value, maybe you assign a weight. So you found a gold bar that weighs 50, but it's worth 500, and you can only carry so much of it because it's heavy. And when you get to the shop, you can sell it for 500. These are the attributes that you may want to attach to objects that are a part of your inventory, but you don't necessarily want to attach it to every single dynamic object because it's never going to go in your inventory, like a set of ladders or a monster. I mean, you could select a monster and say it's collectible and then put it in your inventory, but we'll leave that for the edge cases. Right now, I think you get the idea. And simply by clicking is collectible, this behavior for the potion understands the difference between a regular object you can use right away and one for the inventory. So now when I go up to it, the behavior knows it's a collectible and offers me a different choice. E to collect mana potion. So now, and this is in quotes, it's in my inventory. Isn't really in my inventory. We've still got to create some more data structures to refine exactly how we're going to store all these objects and organize them in such a way that it's super user definable. But let's say it's in the inventory. So now, sometime later in the game, I can press Q to use my mana potion, drinky drink, and then I get my 10 mana, and then I can start casting fireballs out my eyes. So you get the idea of where we're coming from with that. It's collectible means it's now an inventory tolerable object that you can now collect, run around, collect lots of things. And in the RPG guide, it goes into lots more detail on exactly how we can collect, say, 20 of the same object. So rather than just have a grid with 20 identical bars of gold, it will be just one bar of gold with a little quantity in the bottom left, which says 10 or 20 or whatever quantity. That's the case of if you go in out collecting lots of different ingredients and there's a crafting mode, you want to collect lots of these things. You don't want to flood your inventory. You get the idea. Anyone who's played an RPG game, these are common tropes that we're reproducing, but in such a way that it's very user definable, so you're not waiting on us to change some hacked in logic. It's all out there for you to go in and change. Just a quick look at all the stuff. These ones give me armor. So you see armor on the left. There's 210 armors, and I can add that. The little shield at the bottom and 50 is armor toughness. So armor, traditionally, the more it gets bashed, the more it gets worn, and the less effective the armor becomes. So there is like a percentage chance of it breaking. 50 is a 50-50. If I'd set that little shield to 100, the armor would never break, indestructible armor. And then anything less than 100 percentage is the percentage of it, you know, the percentage actually is the percentage of it not breaking. So 50-50, there's a 50-50 chance of the armor being damaged every time someone clubs it. And eventually your armor becomes 0, and then your health gets impacted. And the cool thing is, the armor and the health is handled now in a separate subsystem. We've pulled out a little bit of Lua, created a unique Lua script for it, and so now you don't have to go in and modify the entire global Lua system for all the player control system. You can just go in and just change what happens to player health. And included in there, and you'll see this if you wanted to dive that deep, is references to armor. We're going to publish a couple of standard, they're not hard coded, but they are standard global variables that if you use them tie in to the default out of the box player mechanic. But there's nothing to stop you going in and adding to that mechanic and adding your own global variables to soup it up. I think there was a game called Mass Effect where it had different kinds of armor. Armor that protect you from blunt force, armor that would protect you from electricity attacks, armor that would protect you from pierced rounds, things like that. So you can go in and add your own extra levels of stats and then control it in the front end from what you see, and at the back end through behaviors, and at the backest end the player control scripts and being able to usurp those and add your own versions. And we're going to engineer it so when you change the out-of-the-box script and you get an update, it doesn't erase your changes. The update that you make will be in the writables folder. You get to keep that. But when you do an update, you'll still get the latest version in the root files, but you don't lose the work that you've done as you're working on your game. My God, that was an intro. But that's basically what we are working on right now. And as you can see, all very scratch graphics. And I think as the weeks roll on, you'll start to see these graphics get formalized. We'll commission some nicer art, stuff that we can own and put in and leave there. And then you'll start to see the evolution of the inventory screens, the map views, the player progress, and seeing how all the logic clicks together. And all the way guaranteeing that it's super user definable, so we're not locking you into a particular style. We're just showing you one template from the building blocks. You take the same building blocks, learn from the templates, and then create as many RPG screens as you need for your game. So pretty exciting stuff, and hopefully you're quite pleased about the fact that we actually have started in earnest on the long-awaited RPG features. Okay, I think we have some time for questions and answers. Okay, let's see if we can get the chat window. It's hiding right now. Here it is. Haha. Okay, so we don't have Zach today. Zach's taking a chill, so I'm gonna have to go to the top, find the first question, and work my way down. And this one was posted. Duke229 posted it almost immediately. I think he posted it whilst the intro credits were still rolling. This is the question. When will GameGuru Classic finally have fully functional multiplayer back? A lot of people are waiting. I get comments on YouTube at least once a week. As you can imagine, it's not super top priority. Our super top priority is getting GameGuru Max to version 1. That's where a lot of our energies are being spent. You will notice though, if you download the latest repository on GameGuru Classic, we've already added the Photon folder with all the tech in there. And if you dive into it, you'll see a lot of the code emulated for what we actually need to do. Not saying it's just a case of quickly connecting it up, like we did with the virtual reality elements of Max a couple of weeks ago. There is still a lot more work. But as you can imagine, it's not a top priority whilst we're working on Max. However, because the repo is available, anyone who wants to can go in and see if they can connect up the Photon tech. It's not rocket science. Obviously, it takes a lot of learning and faffing about, but you could get it up and running. Once version 1 is done and the internal team can look again at GameGuru Classic, I think that's probably going to be one of the things to get done, to drop the Steam multiplayer API and introduce the Photon multiplayer system. So yeah, can't really give you an ETA on that, but certainly it is on our radar to finish that off, because you're right, a lot of people have been waiting for it, and introducing Photon also gives people that much longer waited feature of not needing Steam to be able to share your multiplayer games and play with your friends. You currently can't do that unless your friend has GameGuru Classic, which kind of defeats the object to some degree, at least for a game maker that makes standalones. Makes more sense if it's just a regular game. Naturally, you want both parties in the multiplayer game to both own the game, but not so much for GameGuru Classic. You want to be able to save a standalone and then it's free to use. Okay, looking down the list, we can hear you. Okay, I think that's where we're going to start looking at questions, and I think I found one. Here it is. What about companions? Companions is good. Require context, I think. Here's a question. How is the latest Wicked update coming along? Wicked engine work has paused until we get to GameGuru Max version 1. As you probably heard from previous broadcasts and some other pieces of information that went out, we paused the DX12 because it was messing everything up. It's not that we can't do DX12, we got a very long way. We got like 95% complete, but that last 5% was a doozy, creating a lot of work and a lot of delays in actually just getting it to where it was on the last version of DX11. So what we're doing, we're getting to GameGuru Max version 1 with the latest version of DX11. It has proved to be super stable over the last couple of weeks, and so we like that, so we're sticking with that. Once version 1 is out the way, we'll look again at the DX12 and upgrading to the very, very latest Wicked engine. See previous broadcasts for the minutiae as to what made that decision easy for us. Okay, another question. This is from Tam51. I tried to edit the HUDs because I wanted to move things about a bit. Now it won't let me edit them again. I can't change them around again. Will this be fixed soon? Yes, that is a known bug. Let me think. What is the quickest way of fixing it? I think it's to create a new project. Yeah, I think probably the problem is if you've been using dev versions and you had some legacy game projects, those were more likely to mess up. Whereas if you just start a brand new game project and move your FPMs across, and to even to some degrees your project files in your articles folder, then you should be alright with your HUD editing. But yeah, there is a known bug. Reproducing it has been the problem, which is why it's still outstanding and it's not already been fixed. But yeah, we do have one reproducible scenario now, so sometime this week we'll be looking at that. Okay, another question. Once we have imported an NPC model, can you make it possible to get back into the animation editor in order to set them up more effectively to be able to change them around? Okay, in translation, 6 question marks, well done. Yeah, you're using the model importer, you've grabbed a model, probably a character, you've assigned your animations then, at that point, then you've saved the model out, you've saved the character out, and it's running around your game, and now you want to change the animation of that character, and you don't have it anymore because it was in the model importer. The only choice really is to keep all your raw files, so that model import process, maintain it. So if you ever want to add animations or edit and go through that import process again. I do like the idea of bringing up the animation editor after the fact, not just for stuff you've imported, but even usurping existing characters that are in the out-of-the-box stock library and maybe messing with those animations as well. That would also be cool, but it's not on the very, very short-term roadmap. Not a lot of people have been asking for it. Extreme strategy. Companions are a cancer of RPG games. Right, so in the context of you've got the player and then there's people following you, we call them allies. And when you run around, the allies fire alongside you and you can kill more enemies, etc. It depends how you implement them, I suppose. You can switch off friendly fire and you can make sure that they're not ever in your line of sight when trying to shoot people down. There are nice ways of doing ally AI. So we've not ruled it out, and in fact it's in GameGuru Max right now. Just click a character, set it to an ally, give it a weapon, run around and helps you. So go check that out. Another question from Dad Good, is there a way to have the level or game difficulty? Obviously the hard way is just to set all of the healths of the enemies and the power of the weapons and the health of the player, etc. And you just keep changing those values until you get that nice sweet spot between a game that's not too difficult and not too easy. But I suspect what you're asking is, can we have some sort of slider, easy, medium hard, extra hard, insanely hard, in your game itself, and then all the values that I've just mentioned can be modulated by that setting. That's not on a roadmap for version 1, but it is a good idea, and it's not super difficult to do. But I think we'll do that once we've established the RPG mechanics outright, because there's a lot of values there and you don't really want to scale all of them up and down. It's a tricky thing getting that gameplay difficulty curve just right. And so let's finish the list of values and stats, and then we can look at what makes it difficult, what makes it hard. Sometimes you can make a game so hard it's now unplayable and unenjoyable for anyone. Anyone played Dark Souls? So yeah, tricky one that, but yeah, we should have some kind of access to be able to control that easily in your standalone game. Here's a question from Loretta M. Will there be an option for turning the HUD off and on during gameplay? There is scripts for that. I mean, you can set up a zone and set a behavior called hide HUDs. You walk into it, all your HUDs disappear. and then you can go into another zone and it says show HUDs, and all your HUDs will reappear. There is going to be a new feature that screens and HUDs can be tied to key presses. The in-game HUD by default is shown, but something like an inventory, you'd have to press like an I key to bring up the inventory screen, and then that will hide the in-game HUD and bring up the inventory. So with that function in place, it should then be possible to assign a key to your in-game HUDs. So you can switch your in-game HUD on and off with a key press. And that would just be a natural byproduct of having to do it for things like an inventory screen and a map screen. So yeah, I think you're going to get your wish. Here's a question from Dark Hill Studios. Are there plans to add a drop-down list of users set global variables when assigning a global variable to an object? Yes, you've leaped onto the version 2 of that system. As you've seen, we're doing it now just so we maintain maximum flexibility. The moment we reinforce that with some hard-coded gadgets and ways of describing variables and how to organise them and how to see them and how to add and subtract them, going into the management of the thing, I also like that idea, but I don't want to preempt an interface that may restrict what you can do in the future. So let's get all the mechanics running, get the logic tying in very nicely with the front end, and then we'll ask ourselves, is it really like long-winded and prone to error to have to manually type out these variables, and making sure that if there was a typo, for example, your front end could have a value but your in-game is changing the wrong global, so you'd never see your HUD change. So there's a good element for adding sort of a prefixed set of global variables. But for this first implementation, we're not doing that. But yeah, absolutely pressure us if you think, no, this is clearly unacceptable. I always make spelling mistakes, which means I'm going to spend a lot longer connecting up my in-game logic with the front screen HUDs. Question. This is from 3Com. Any chance to have third person at some point? No plans to do a third person in GameGuru Max. We just want to focus on first person. The reason is there's a lot of work to do just on first person, and third person just opens up a whole other game mechanic. I mean, a whole other game, really. Another game engine, to be fair. I mean, sure, people will be making scripts and behaviours which have the camera floating around and doing third person-y style things, and that's fine. But we're probably going to let the community do that. I think we're just going to focus on less is more. Instead of trying to write 50 features that are all half-baked, we'll write 5 features that are really well implemented. I think that's a better strategy for our small team. Okay, next question. Am I scrolling? Yes, I'm scrolling. Whoa. There you go. This is a question from Monkey Frog Studios. Will the DX12 Wicked integration be part of the V1 release? No. No, we're going to get all the way to version 1 with all our features and limbs intact using the latest version of DX11. It's proved to be the most stable, and it will be around for a very long time. Once version 1 is done and we are out of early access, then we'll look at DX12 and the horror stories that may be required to implement it in a way that it still stays stable at the end of it. So we're going to look at that question after version 1. Matamet asks, when RPG module will be ready? RPG module will be ready on the release of version 1, and we don't have an ETA on when version 1 will be released. But it's imminent. We've done nearly all of the software now, it's just RPG and VR. So you don't have much longer to wait, he says, but take that with a pinch of salt. Nightfall asks a question. Will you think you get GameGuru Max done in 2024? No, not 2024, that's ridiculous. 2025, surely. No, I don't know. I'm thinking version 1 2023 is what I'm thinking. Unless you want me to draw it out for another year, I'm happy to do that. Maybe 2 years. But no, it's 2023. I want this thing out into the world so people can start making cool games. Okay, another question. Retro Gameblow asks, normally most RPG armor merely reduces damage rather than work as a shield. Might be worth adding as an option. Yeah, the implementation that we put in, super rudimentary, super simple. And we will add, if it's a really common trope, and I think you're right, that it doesn't entirely block the damage, it mitigates it. So maybe there's a percentage chance of damage getting through, so that'd be an additional value. We'll throw in a few for our template, just so, you know, no one has to seriously script to have a decent RPG battle damage mechanic. But at some point we're going to draw the line and say, look, if you want 17 different kinds of armour, you're going to have to write that yourself. We'll just give you the basics. And I think, yeah, percentage chance of damage getting through despite you having armour, I think that's pretty common. I think that will happen. Okay, question. Extreme Strategy asks, when will we have a companions setup system inside GGM? It will be good to be able to select which allies you have fighting by your side. It's already in. I think I've already said this, haven't I? If you drop in a character and you set that character to character attack, and in the character attack properties there's a drop down and one of them says ally, and then you then drop in some other characters that are default out of the box as enemies, run test level, the character you set to an ally will fight by your side. It will be your companion during that level firefight. Go check it out, it's cool. And if it isn't cool, come back and let me know. Okay, Nightfall also asks, will we companion... Sorry, getting companion on the brain now. Will we comparison with DX12 and DX11 when you done? There won't be a DX12 when we done. So version 1 is DirectX 11, the latest version. Once that's done, we'll look at DirectX 12. In terms of comparison, DX12 should do everything DX11 does with the following advantages. It's future-proof. It will last a lot longer. When they discontinue 11, 12 will be kicking around. Whoa, Nightfall just retracted his question. Then I'll retract the rest of my answer. And I can move on. 3Com, do you think about RPG needing FX shader support and particle lure support? Particle lure support. Yeah, we should look at that, shouldn't we? It's pretty good just dropping in a particle, but there's precious few controls in the properties for that particle. And rather than us have an exhaustive list down the right hand side, it'll start to look like the particle editor. But allowing some Lotus scripting commands to sort of like manipulate those properties and just leave it up to scripters to then offer those various services, that's not such a bad idea. So stick that in the issues board if it's not already there. That's a really cool feature request. And the first part, needing a FX shader support. Well, as you may know, there already is shaders in GameGuru Max, but I think what you're asking is, can we have our own custom shaders? For version 1, no. We're just going to rely on the shaders that exist. And then after version 1, we'll look at how important it is for people to be able to write their own shaders from scratch and add them to GameGuru Max. It is not an easy task, and it has a million ways for you to screw up when you start playing around with shaders. And it might be something not everybody wants, and also wants us to work on more for the masses sort of features. So that may never happen. But it will continue the conversation. Just checking the clock, we're 34 minutes in. But as you know from the last broadcast, we've dropped the Discord, so I'm quite happy to answer a few more questions. And it looks like we are towards the end. I've just jinxed myself. People are going to ask lots of questions now, but we'll carry on. This is from Retro6502. Which modes are currently available in GameGuru Max? Modes as in game genres, we're only supporting first-person shooter at the moment. Once we finish RPG, you'll have shooter and RPG game modes. And along the way, we've managed to add lots and lots and lots of the puzzle mechanics for the puzzle genre. And that would complete all 3 modes we originally set out to do. Shooters, RPG, and puzzle games, in or out of VR experience. So 1 down, 1 in progress, and the 3rd one will be done by proxy. So yeah, we're about halfway, I think. Another question, this is from Jim Barnes. Will there be in-game progress for the character's abilities such as strength, accuracy, and other abilities? Absolutely. The RPG guide that you saw right at the start had a second screen called Player Progress. Player Progress is a vital component of an RPG game. The fact that a player starts off as a grunt, and then after 200 hours of gameplay, they're like supreme knight of the realm with literally every weapon and sword and da-da-da. And along the way, your player's abilities and proficiencies increase as you gain rewards. So You complete a mission, you get 2 skill points. You can spend those skill points on making your character faster or stronger or better at magic or better at sword wielding, whatever it happens to be. So yeah, that's a critical component. Watch out in future broadcasts for details on that. Not necessarily pretty graphics, but the mechanics you need to bring that out in your games. Another question from Retro6502. What types of RPG do you envisage being able to create in GameGuru Max? What existing games are you aiming to be similar to? Skyrim. Look, I spend all my time coding. Don't have that much time playing games, although I have played quite a lot. I like the Skyrim series. That's what my go-to if I think of RPG, because it's just a pure example of the traditional RPG that I grew up with. But certainly Fallout is another game that I quite like, and Far Cry. All these things have strong RPG elements, and those are the things that I'll draw inspiration from. But I'm not going to say that I'm going to reproduce every single feature of all those 3 games. They were developed by massive teams over many years. We ain't doing that. But we're going to do a lot of the common tropes so you can create a decent RPG game with GameGuru Max when we release version 1. And the final question of the day. When will be better graphics and cutscenes? The graphics that you see right now in the current version of GameGuru Max will not be improved. Those are the graphics we're shipping with for version 1. New DLCs may be created by third-party artists that might be better than the graphics we have now, but you will have to look to those third-party artists for those better graphics. The graphics that you see today, that's pretty much it. So if you're not impressed with the graphics that we currently have, it's probably best that either you hire an artist, do better graphics, or go on to some asset stores and buy those models and import them into GameGuru Max. Just a word of warning, models are very expensive when you're buying them one by one. When we give you models, we give you 100 for 30 quid, $30. So you get really good value, even though they're not the better graphics that you refer to. And no plans to do a cutscene editor in GameGuru Max for version 1. I have heard talk about a cutscene editor, but I'll keep that pretty dark right now. But it's not us that's creating it. So keep an eye out on the socials if something like that emerges into the ether for GameGuru Max. And okay, one last question, because Ahmad, is it Ahmad Yosef, hasn't asked one yet, so he gets the final answer. I have a question. Why an FPS creator, game maker we wrote over 10 years ago, the enemy is not smart, that's mean he not shooting and not smart, you can kill him easily, and this problem also in GameGuru, presumably GameGuru Classic. AI is a bugger. That's the answer. There's no plans to improve the AI of FPS Creator. We barely held on to the source code. It's now completely open source. Or at least the source code is available, and you can go and look at the AI and see if you can improve it if you want to tackle some AI coding. We are going to be looking at GameGuru Classic AI. That's something that is on our radar. But deciding exactly what AI you want, well, how long's a piece of string? Yeah, there's actually an answer to how long's a piece of string, but I forget for the moment. And DM on doubles what I've hinted at. You can create your own AI if you want to. It's not an easy job, but it's by no means impossible. Not even that difficult, and it is a lot of fun. But you do have to be pretty committed to get to the end and create your own. In fact, no, actually, there was a video shared with me only today. Someone from the community says, "Are you interested in this AI stuff that I've been working on for GameGuru Classic?" I think it is. So yeah, a little pearl there. I don't know anymore because I can't remember anymore. But watch out, there may actually be a third party working on some cool AI. So that's relevant. So glad I remembered that. Okay, that's it for this week. I will be back as usual next Wednesday at 7 p.m. GMT to answer more of your lovely questions and to reveal anything else that's been going on in GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max land. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and I hope you've heard me Otherwise, I've been talking in a room on my own for the last 40 minutes. So until next week, thanks very much for listening, and I'll say goodbye.